Hey, I'm John Amodea with Paintball Media.
Tom Cole with Major League Paintball.
Dave Painter, previously Fox 4 Paintball and Upton 187 Crew.
So we're here. I brought these guys in to kind of talk through some numbers. We kind of elapsed the whole spectrum of tournament paintball. He was around before me. I played from 15-man all the way up until the current airball era, currently running the NXL and the ICPL. And Dave Painter played through the X-Ball era, 7-man era, and now into the 10-man era. So we kind of have a lot of historical data. And one of the things that I find funny is I play a lot of paintball, or I'm at a lot of paintball tournaments, and I play some paintball tournaments, and you know the discussion always comes up with format and when we were at our peak and what the best thing was we ever did in paintball. So, and I feel like there's a lot of anecdotal stories, and sometimes we're looking through rosy goggles, kind of like what we described from the past. So I did like a deep dive into some of the data to try and figure it out. And I brought these guys to kind of come in and discuss that a little bit and go through some of the findings that I felt were unique. So what I'd like you guys to do is if you can drop in and post a little comment down at the bottom and let us know what you think the largest era was, what your favorite era was, some of your favorite venues were. And the next portion of this video series is going to be about formats and what we think a good format to have moving forward, some of the formats we can try and push. So if you could also put some of your ideas for formats in the comments, and we will read those and discuss those and actually kind of dissect your formats and get our opinions on what we think of those formats. So we're going to dig into this right now and kind of go into stuff. And one of the things, one of the first anecdotal stories that got me started doing this was back in the PSP days. I was sitting at a meeting with a bunch of the industry guys, and they were like, you know, what we really need is that older player to start playing again because we had all these young guys. And I agreed with them. We were all, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid about the old people. And then we go back and we run the numbers, and I find out the exact opposite is happening. We're actually getting older, and the younger players aren't playing as much. And it's just because we were so young when we started. 30 years old seemed old. Now I got dynasty guys out here playing at the age of 40. So I thought that was a little weird. So we have a stat here that we printed out. We used to be, back in 2005, the average starting age for a tournament paintball player was 20 years old. And now we're all the way up to 26. That's a crazy number to me.
That's a crazy number.
So you have any idea? Dave, you got any idea why? What do you think? What your thoughts are?
I mean, I'd like to say 10-man maybe brought some of the older players back, but I think you also hit upon it, right? Dynasty, you have tournament players sticking around longer, so the number in 2022 represents a Dynasty player in 22.
Yep.
Well, that same player was back in 2002.
Yeah, but this is starting. This is the first time they played a tournament.
First player.
This isn't their average age at the tournament. That age has also gone up. But actually, the starting player, the first time they're going to play a tournament,
it cost impact, right? Cost to play, cost to entry.
You think it's more expensive now than it was?
Probably if you put inflation, no. But if you look at just dollars and the economics of the world and
I got a theory, so I'll let John first go.
No, I have a question. I guess I would raise is, in the '80s, the tournament players were in their 40s, and 45 years old was common at that point. I wonder if, as the game became a little bit more affordable, that number dropped and dropped and dropped to the point where now maybe their kids play, and the game back then was you didn't even know what paintball was. Most people did,
right?
So you have that public, perception back then was a war game. Now everybody understands what paintball is. It's not a new thing anymore. So I think there was an excitement back in those early 2000s. The game came out of the woods. We had beautiful, jerseys, and we looked like
first time ever with beautiful jerseys.
Yeah.
It is weird though, because you think more kids are playing. Birthday parties is like the hot spot at all the fields. You think more are playing. So I have an ongoing theory that now as tournament promotion has come away from the park level and has gone to promoters. Right, we have a lot of promoters in the industry now that are running tournaments at other people's parks, or the Major League, which is running around traveling. We don't have that direct recruitment at the field level, right? The field owners no longer engaging with the customers, recruiting the tournaments. And actually, I think we have the opposite, where a lot of field owners are like, I don't really want my customers to transform into tournament players because, in all offense, we can be challenging, right? So it doesn't matter what level we end up at. Can be challenging. So that's interesting. And I don't know if it's a bad thing that we now have an older player, but it is something worth getting into.
But that goes back to cost of entry as well, right? If the cost of entry is I have to travel to an event
to play
versus I'm playing at my local field, right? There's a cost associated with driving, flying, hotels, food, whatever. that start to impact that.
And I'll give a little spoiler alert. One of my personal theories about the biggest challenge we have facing paintball, and like I said, we always debate all these formats: 10-man, X ball, 15 balls second, 7 balls second. I think the biggest challenge we face as an industry moving forward is the cost of tournament paintball.
Yeah.
The cost of tournament paintball has continued to rise. I know we're probably on the high end of that, but across the board, the amount of paint we shoot, the amount of cost of going to events and all that stuff has continued to rise. And that could be one of the reasons that we're stifling.
And this is, let's face it, this is a more expensive way to play the game than we played it years ago, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. On all sides.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's talk about women playing the sport. That's one of the things that our big initiative was last year, was to try and get more women playing the sport. And it's interesting because it is kind of like every person's game, right, is what we always bill it as, right? Yet we still have a strong male presence at the game all the time. And I think we peaked, according to our stuff, back in 2004. We had 133 women play. This is uniques. That means they played at least once in a season. And last year, we doubled that number, right? 226, which is the highest ever by far. I don't know if that's sustainable, if we're going to keep that number. But, I mean, what do you think? What are the challenges facing the industry getting, women involved and stuff like that?
A lot of it at first was focus, right? You didn't have a woman-focused division. So, not sure how to say it's not political, but, the men and women competing differently on the same field is challenging, right?
Yeah.
But giving them their own venue, their own avenue to compete against them, the same group, made it a lot more attainable, a lot more attractive, I think, to them to play.
And I think the growth sort of feeds on itself, right? So you have a female division now, and now you have a paintball documentary, 4-part series, whatever, just on the female division, right?
Yep.
So this kind of promotes something that has been started that should grow because it's getting more publicity, more press, right? So it should, snowball on its own success.
So my journey when I started, I was actually riding around with a PGA guy, and we were talking about the differences between our sports, and he was an executive with the PGA for the Live Tour. And he said, some of the stuff they saw their biggest growth was when they kind of added that female element, right? So he's like, that is the biggest single needle mover you can do. And I'm pretty happy with where we're at. Let's just hope we can continue to make that grow. It'll be interesting to see. All right, so this is where we start getting into the juicy stuff. We use two different numbers. I use numbers to try and relay our stuff. And one is unique player counts, and one is player days. And so I'm just going to describe the two. So a unique player is Ryan Greenspan would count once. So it doesn't matter how many events he plays at the NXL. Doesn't matter how many formats he plays. He would only get count once. And then player appearance would be how many times Ryan plays. So if he played 5 NXLs, that would count for 5. And I think both those numbers are important because it's not just, if you run a restaurant, you just don't want the people to come and eat once and never come back. You want them to play over and over and over again, or eat over and over again, and in our situation, play over and over again. So I think both those numbers are high. And one of the things we tried to do since we started running the NXL was try and get people to play more, and also to offer these Sunday days so people can play more or whatever. But so we're going to talk about unique players over time, and everybody has all this debates about when we were at our peak. And we don't really, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of the NPPL numbers, but we do have some. So starting in 2003, unique numbers, I mean, we started out at 3805, and you could see through the chart that we kind of had a little dip all the way back to 2010, and I'm assuming that was the economic crisis.
Starting at 8.
And then we've kind of done a steadily trend, and so now we're up to about 6,500 unique players last year playing at the Premier League side. So I'm counting the NPPL, the PSP, and the NXL on the same purpose. That's like the National League or whatever. So I mean, I think those numbers are healthy. Obviously, I think everybody would like to see that number go up. But so what do you think of the numbers?
I mean, you're offering so many formats now, right? So it gives a chance. People want to come in at more entry level play, 5-man or whatever. Less expensive, right? You're not spending as much money on paint or practice leading up to it. And you could be sort of now the National League has a less serious brackets, I will say, as opposed to back in the early days where you had pro and amateur, and even the amateur teams were really serious, right? And spent a lot of money practicing and coming to the events. So I think you're offering now you're kind of broadening the base, right? So that's of course going to increase the number. That seems to me to be probably the obvious one, right? The cherry,
I'd have to
cherry
agree
picking
with
that one.
because we probably have roughly the same amount of protein we've always had. Right?
Yeah.
It's rotated in that less than 20 number.
Yeah.
I don't really know what traditional X-Ball had. I think they probably had 12. But yeah, I think it kind of rotated around a little bit. So so we do have player appearances here. So the player appearance is the other number, and we're gonna have to throw out those first couple of years because 2003, I guess we don't have to really. In 2003, we were at 5,600 player appearances, and now we're up to 15,000 player appearances.
Yeah.
So that number's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the player appearances. I don't know if that means we're just getting more entrance fees out of everybody, or I guess that means people are playing more paintball. So I think that's a good thing.
But go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
So just to clarify, the 2003 number, that'd be 10-man. Typically played 5-man and 10-man at the same event. Would that count as 2 entrances?
Actually, no. 2003 would be the start of the PSP, the start of X-Ball. So we didn't go back to the uniques because we don't know the uniques. Yeah. That's one of the challenges of trying to do the historical stuff. I actually went through all the old magazines and plugged in all the team counts and then created what the players were. But I can't do uniques because I really don't know the rosters or whatever. So back in the day, we didn't have the uniques. Yeah. So we started the uniques into 2003. And the other unfairness about this, in true disclosure, is this doesn't have the NPPL's uniques because at one point from 2003 till about 2013, the NPPL was actually competing with the PSP in the marketplace to try and go. And we have another chart that kind of shows that on the team counts or whatever.
But I think the important thing here, though, is also, Ryan Greenspan's going to be at all the events, right?
Correct.
The guys of that nature are going to be at all the events. But as that number rises, you would want to see that rising from the bottom, right? People
Correct.
that come to events over and over and over, not play a couple and bail, right? Because that's what the future is going to be based on, right? As they move up the bracket, they've got to continue to play to do that. So.
Right, and I just think the more times you get to play throughout the year is better for everybody, right? It's better for the industry. We get more play days. It shows people are having a good time, kind of that stuff. So I think all of that's pretty important. And I don't know which one's more important, uniques or whatever. I mean, I guess uniques is probably more important overall just because that would just mean how big our overall base was. So from the Premier League or the NXL League's point of view, we would rather have more uniques and a smaller percentage of the participation. Because once again, I'm a firm believer that you should play, if you're in a lower division, you should play one NXL and one World Cup, not try and compete at all of them, which might seem counterintuitive. But I think that's a healthier position to be as a D5 and a D4 person. And some of those guys are going to chase the series or whatever, but that's on them. But I think it's a healthier place for the industry is that people are playing local and then playing their regional, their national event when it comes to them, and then playing World Cup. All right, and so this is the fun one. This is the one that I really like. This is the team counts over time and leagues and different stuff like that. And it really is funny because when I talk to people, they're like, I'm like, so how many people do you think were at the Amateur Open? And they're like, I don't know, 200 teams. And in reality, it was about
50, 60
teams. Yep. So we've kind of painted this stuff as being like these whole grand days. So we actually started, my numbers start in 1998. So we had 400 teams playing the national circuit in 1998. And it's funny because, for me, when I played back then, the event seemed so big. You know what I mean? And really, they were 30 teams or something at an event. And you felt like,
I remember
we were on top of the world.
The DC Cup in 1994, MPPL DC Cup, was the biggest MPPL event outside of the World Cup. And it had 36 teams, I believe. 32 teams.
Yeah,
this was the big event.
The big event. I brought my family there to show them how big we were.
We remember these things so much bigger, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. But this chart's pretty neat because it shows the effects of changing leagues and the little never-ending internal war at the top. And we at the NXL have had the benefit of not having a competitor. We're the longest living league without another national league on top of it, other than the NPPL in its early days. So, and you see, and this is one of the debates I have. So it took us forever to get back to the change from 10-man to X-Ball. So, in just so everybody knows, in 2002, there was only one league. It was the NPPL, and they played 10-man and 5-man on airball. And then in 2003, we had a league split where the PSP and the NPPL split. Both of them have different opinions of what the best format was going to be. Neither format was 10-man. The NPPL went to 7-man, and the PSP went to X-Ball. They kind of had 10-man for a little while, but they were obviously phasing that out. And X-Ball was supposed to be kind of like the future of the sport. And I'm depressed to say that we really didn't move the needle until just recently did we start picking those numbers back up again. And I wonder, just as a paintball fan, would we have continued on this same trajectory if we had never left 10-man? Or if we had never had a league split? What do you think?
I mean, obviously the league split is always one of those issues that drives players out. You you have loyalty to certain formats, certain leagues, right? And when that league disappears, you have people that disappear with it, right? And so that's going to drive your number down, and then you got to build that number back up.
Yeah. And when you change formats, you throw just a wrench into the thing, right? When you go from 20 man to 15 man, you lose players. When you go to 15 to 10, you lose players. You go to 10-7, you lose players. And it's just the natural progression. But I think that's our human nature too. When we talked about this earlier off camera, where when a school closes, sometimes these people don't re-enroll in another school. A church closes, they stop going to church. It's just kind of human nature. You're comfortable in what you're doing, and then you just walk away.
And I use this 3 as an example. So if we were a 10-man team and we suddenly went to 7, the 3 of us are getting the axe, right? And then they're always like, "Well, you're just going to reform another 7-man team." I was like, "Yeah, the dream team is going to reform a 7-man team and go start again."
Team? I want to know.
We were the 3 guys that could afford to pay.
We were the 3 guys that could afford to pay. But it is interesting that we put so much thought into format, and especially in our emerging years, we were really always debating format. And even today, I mean, it's the number one conversation, whether I'm at dinner, at a wedding, at a birthday party. Anywhere that I go, I'm being hashed with formats. Like the classic guys are telling me just to get rid of the NXL completely and just go straight classic in the woods. The NXL guys are telling me to go to 15 balls a second. Whatever. We are in a constant debate about that stuff. And it's funny. No one says we should move the respawn space closer to Pegasus Bridge at D-Day, right? It's like we completely forget that scenario is another big part of paintball. But everybody just sees it from their perspective, and it's kind of unique in that way. But yeah, we can never go back in time, but it would be interesting to see if that graph would have just continued to grow if we'd have stayed at 10-man, or if the format was just destined to fail no matter what.
Or if the NXL didn't diversify to as many divisions, what would this number look like?
Yeah,
got it. That's a good point too.
Right.
Yeah, I worry about I'm the master of diversification, right? I'm 3-man, 10-man, 7-man. We'll throw everything out there, right? But I do worry that it dilutes it up a little bit. It kind of creates a blended format, you know what I mean? Where there's lots of different rules and there's lots of different choices, and maybe that's a good thing, but it also kind of makes not one clear winner of who's winning what, right? I guess we'll assume Dynasty is the best team in the world, right? But there's some debate. But there's some debate whether it's the ICPL team or whatever. I guess there's not much debate. The ICPL team's been debated.
Not recently.
But it is weird also. This is one of my favorite things. So we switched all these formats, and everybody's always pitching this different stuff to me, right? And then, so Dynasty wins the ICC, which is a mech mounds tournament. They win the PSP X Ball. They win traditional X Ball. They win 7-man. They win, a good player's a good player. There's not much we can do about it. But I guess there is some benefits to different formats. So, So just in my argument is, so right now, everybody's always like, what do we got to do to get back to the greatness? So right now, last year, we did 1,753 teams played through the NXL and the ICPL. It's the largest one league we've ever had in tournament history. So I'm pretty happy about that.
It's double the size of what it was 20 years ago.
Double the size of what it was 20 years ago.
But the question is, what do you do to keep that number going? Right? What do you do to keep it going up?
That's the never-ending debate. So... And so I said, so when we talk about these formats, and you guys are going to chime in down below, I really want 2 distinct paths, right? So we have the television path, which is to make the game more spectator friendly. And I think that is a direct opposite of trying to make the game more affordable and fun to play. The two do not necessarily work together. And BMX gave me the example of this. When they tried to get in the Olympics had a lot to do with what their format was going to be in the Olympics. So they made it a lot more extreme. And when they made it extreme, BMX didn't see any increase in their participation. So what people want to watch is not necessarily what they want to do.
And so do we make the game the kind of game that players want to play or that people want to watch? That
is the problem. Yeah. But I think we should come up with 2 different formats, and that's y'all's challenge. Come up with a format that is affordable play, yet fun and good to play, and kind of brings in all players, and then maybe some tweaks to make the current format that we have a little more viewer friendly, because it is confusing to watch. I personally hate to concede. It's one of my pet peeves. So please chime in below. Also let us know what event we got, and we'll do a deeper dive into that event, how many teams they had and stuff like that of your historic events. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add?
I was just going to say, this is the reason why the game's growing, because people are paying attention, right? It's been a long time. We just kind of ran tournament paintball and paintball in general on what the eyeball told us, right?
Right.
But the eyeball is really deceiving, as we can see from the charts, right?
Especially at our age, very deceiving.
Yes.
Right. But no, it's great that in today's world, right, we have the technology to track all the data. Yeah. The important part, though, is to analyze the data, and then
Right.
put it to use, right? And that's what we're doing now, and you're doing it by pulling all this together.
Yeah.
10, 15, 20 years ago, like John said, right? We looked at World Cup and said, this is a huge event, or,
Yeah.
Am Open, this is a monster event. 40 teams.
40 teams. They do the same to me with like locations. Like, let's go to Phoenix, and Phoenix had 72 teams, right? And I look back at these numbers like, oh my god, I can't believe I thought
Why'd
that was
I go
going to be.
there?
Why did I go there? It's one of those things. Well, feel free to chime in, and so we'll have a link below that has all our historical data and where we're pulling that from. So you can go in there and you can do it. There's also going to be a link where you can correct some of our data if you find something that we have wrong. And once again, please chime in and give us your opinions. No format is too outlandish to try for us. So send it in. I love debating like all the different stuff, things paintball. So feel free to chime in.